Welcome to the Jaron Jarvis channel. I am Jaron Jarvis. Today, I would like to introduce to you, the telephone game. The parents conversed with one another while the children chased each other around in a myriad of games. The annual Christmas party was an event we all enjoyed, if for nothing else than the open bar. The sound of metal on glass echoed throughout the open room as Mr. Daniels, the company owner, tapped a fork readily against his champagne glass. Not completely unlikable, but I considered him a bit uncouth. At least for my taste it's been another stellar year, as your bonus checks can bear witness to, and I just wanted to thank all of why. He was cut off abruptly as the children began jumping up and down laughing as they repeatedly yelled out telephone game over and over. Some of the adults began snickering at the interruption as others, presumably the parents, exchanged embarrassed looks as they shushed the children to quiet down. This did nothing to quiet the children, who continued jumping up and down, yelling the name of a game I hadn't played since I was a child. Yes, well, Mr. Daniels said through a laugh, and perhaps a tinge of annoyance, who wants to talk about numbers on Christmas, right? It's all about the little ones, right? Let's play the telephone game. He yelled with a clap of his hands in the direction of the children. They all screamed with delight at his acquiescence to their demands. One of the children began making a shooing motion towards the adults as he yelled, "Y'all are hogging all the room." As the adults hurriedly scuttled backwards with a laugh at being commanded by a child. Clearly the children were running the show here. The children all giggled with excitement as they lined up facing the adults in the room. There were only 7 of them. That was enough to get some pretty funny variations of any message by the time they'd completed the link. Get a joker like me in there, who purposely changes messages, and you're likely to get some ridiculous transitions by the time it gets to the end. Before starting, one of the children stated that after each round the person on the end would go to the start of the line until all of the children had had a chance from start to finish. This would continue each round until the last child had worked their way to the end. The guest laughed and cheered, clearly enjoying the effort these children had put into the game. 7 children. 7 rounds. I'll admit, it was better than the normal party of endless chatter with co-workers I have to talk with on a daily basis already. I laughed with those around me, also eager with anticipation, as the children began the game. We all giggled, pointed, and shushed each other as the children began whispering into one another's ear, one by one, until the last child had whispered. The last child, with a slight giggle, belted out, "One of you has a secret. If you tell everyone your secret then we win." As the last word left his mouth, he turned around and sped off to take his place at the front of the line. Everyone began chuckling as someone yelled out, "I don't think you want to hear any of our secrets. I confess, Mr. Daniels, I stole the pen off your desk last week when you weren't looking," laughed Chad, our version of the class clown. Everyone began laughing as Mr. Daniels pointed at him with a mocking look, telling him he'd make sure it was deducted from his next paycheck. The children, clearly uninterested in adult politics, began the next round, giggling with delight as the last finished cupping their hand to the other's ear. The last child yelled out in a loud bellowing voice, "If you don't tell everyone your secret, then he told us that all of us will lose." She squealed as she skipped behind the other children to the front of the line. Everyone was a bit confused at this point. I heard someone quietly ask Mr. Daniels if he had orchestrated this with the parents and children as a joke. He replied with a confused look, and a shake of his head, as the children proceeded into the next round of hushed whispers with one another, not waiting for the adults to question what they were talking about. The adults were quiet now, ears straining intently, as they sought to hear what was being whispered. This felt more like a scripted act now than the telephone game. I decided I would reserve judgment until the game had ended, in hopes it ended innocently enough. "If you try to slow or end the game before we've finished, then all of us will lose," the next boy stated through a shy voice, putting extra emphasis on the words "slow" or "end the game," while spreading his arms in reference to the children beside him as he walked to the front of the line. Hushed whispers filled the room as everyone seemed a bit perturbed by the boy's statement. Someone, a clearly upset woman I did not know, asked out loud, "Did somebody here set this up with my child without asking me first?" As some of the other parents began expressing the same sentiments, the children began whispering to each other again. The mood within the room had clearly failed to disturb their excitement as they laughed and giggled after finishing each whisper. The chamber of adults shushed the anxious parents, clearly into the enthralling spectacle of tonight's entertainment. A little girl with big round eyes stated nonchalantly, "No, Elizabeth. None of them set this up. I set this up. Just remember what happens if you try to slow or stop this game before it's finished. All of these children will lose. Their loss will be on one of you," she stated, once more gesturing to the children on her side, as the child before her had done. She actually shouted the last sentence. At this point a mixture of both anger and confusion erupted within the room. Some of the parents stated intentions of taking their children, that they'd had enough of this game. Others, clearly disturbed by the last message, feared what the child meant by "all of these children will lose. Your actions affect my child and you're not touching them," one of the mothers stated very succinctly to one of the other parents, "Not until I know what it is they lose." The lady whom the child had referred to as Elizabeth stated the child did not know her and could not have known her name. She was clearly disturbed by this latest revelation. Whatever it was, we had 3 rounds left before somebody found out. As the adults argued, the next round of telephone commenced. The children, seemingly unaffected by the room's changed mood, carried on with giggles and laughs as they passed the next message. "One of you has a secret. Are you willing to allow one, or all, of these children to lose in order to save yourself?" said the next little boy. The sound of someone's glass breaking on the smooth tile floor broke the silence of the stunned adults. They were no longer laughing. There were no more questions asking if the game was set up by anyone. There were 7 children, and 5 had already spoken. There were 2 rounds left, and if what these children, or whoever was speaking through them, said was true, then someone, or someones, would lose in the next 2 rounds, potentially all of the children. Shouts of anger and accusations filled the room. "Who's got something to confess?" shouted one man. Others were shouting, "What do you lose? Is someone telling you to say this? If this is a game then you need to tell us right now." The children carried on, completely ignoring what the adults were yelling. Whatever was happening, it was very real, and it definitely wasn't an innocent game of telephone. One of the mothers made an attempt to go in and grab her daughter before, what I can only assume was her husband, grabbed her by the arm shouting, "Are you stupid? Are you willing to risk Amy's life because you think it's a game?" The children carried on the next round as the commotion ensued, whispering one by one into each other's ear. The adults carried on arguing, trying to make sense of what was happening. Some were clearly convinced something terrible had taken control of the children and meant to do them harm should someone interfere or not confess their secret. The next little girl, clearly oblivious to what she was saying, stated through a giggle, "1 round left to confess your secret. Are you willing to see them all lose in order to protect your secret? You have until they finish their last message to confess." At this point the room had erupted into chaos. The little girl jogged laughing to the front of the line, pursed lips and blank expression on her face, and cupped her hands to the little boy's ear that had preceded her. What started as a trickle soon became an open flood of confessions. "I had an affair with your brother." One woman yelled at her husband, "I'm an alcoholic and I beat my wife and son." Yelled Eugene from accounting, "I embezzled from the company. I don't love you anymore." All the while, the children worked their way through the last message. There were 3 left to go in the line, yet whatever secret they, or it, were looking to hear had not been heard yet, because the children kept on whispering. As the second to last child cupped their hands to the last child's ear, one woman screamed out, "For the love of God, please. I killed my wife." Mr. Daniels said through a shameful expression, "I told you all she died in a boating accident out of the country last year. I killed her." He finished his words to shocked expressions, glancing rapidly between him and the children. As the last child lowered their cupped hand, the children began jumping up and down laughing. They thought it was the funniest thing in the world how they'd won, and we'd lost, because they had gotten us to tell them all of our secrets. Deep interwebs.